I had to continue being ahead of the curve, keep learning the new things that are happening, keep my antenna up for what's happening globally, and therefore not be surprised when newer regulation and newer sort of ways of doing business came to India and said, wow, here's a new way. And I said, oh, I've heard about this from South Africa. I heard this in Netherlands or any of the countries which were, moving pretty forward quickly in financial planning.
Welcome to episode 24 of the Innovating Advice Show. I'm joined by Lovaii Navlakhi, founder and CEO of International Money Matters. Lovaii is my first guest from India, so he provides a look at the evolving financial services landscape, technology developments, and the growing middle class there. We also chat about how Lovaii started doing financial planning in India nearly 20 years ago, before he had even been introduced to what financial planning was. So if you're one of the many listeners from countries where financial planning doesn't yet exist, or you're curious how Lovaii has built a strong cross-border planning practice, this episode is for you. And for the show notes, links, and full transcript, go to innovatingadvice.com/episode 24. That's innovatingadvice.com/episode 24. You're listening to the Innovating Advice Show, and I'm your host, Kate Holmes, bringing you the global pulse on financial services innovation, featuring financial planners, financial advisors, and related professionals from all corners of the globe. Let's dive in. Namaste, Lovaii.
Namaste.
Lovaii, thank you for being our first guest from India, which is the 7th largest country by land area, but the 2nd most populous country in the world with 1.3 billion people, more than 1.3 billion people. So let's start by talking through the demographics in India. And I know there's a high wealth inequality there with hundreds of thousands of millionaires and a few thousand ultra rich, being people and families with US $50 million and above. And on the other side, I believe up to 90% have less than US $10,000. So first, can you share with us a little bit about what do clients of financial planning and financial advice look like in India?
Yeah, so thank you for having me. And it's always good to be first because you don't have to live up to anybody else's standards. So I think in India, in terms of, typical financial planning client, I think you must understand that financial planning is relatively new to India. It's only about 15 years old. And also, interestingly, wealth is new to India. So way back in the early 1990s and prior to that, it was very, very difficult for people to make sort of large wealth. It changed a lot with liberalization in 1991. And just to give you some idea, prior to 91, there were periods where if you traveled abroad, you were allowed to carry $250 only.
Wow.
And there were, it would get stamped on your passport. So you could go only once in 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. So obviously people who went abroad, had some friend or relative or the other who had money waiting for them to spend. So wealth is very, very new to India. It's just about 2 decades old. And to give you some idea of most people prior to the 90s could only afford to buy a home for their family when they either retired or when they were just about to retire. And the concept of taking a loan to buy a home or anything else didn't really exist.
So you actually had to save up the entire cost of a home and then buy it outright. That's kind of wild.
Yeah, it's not wild. It's a simple thing to do, but we learn the wild from you.
It doesn't happen that often.
That's true. When I got into financial planning, I actually started my business in 2001. I had no idea what financial planning meant because only in 2004 did the financial planning course come to India.
Yeah.
When people said, you must come for this introductory course on financial planning, and they said things like planning for goals, I said, oh, I think I've been doing something like this, but
Yeah.
no idea. And so just happened to be in the right place, right time, and became in the first batch of CFPs from India.
That's
So,
very cool.
yeah.
So you've seen a lot of change over the last 15 to 20 years. So what do your clients look like?
We've tried very hard in our business to try and educate clients and make them aware about the need to plan. So in the beginning, it was very difficult because nobody understood the concept at all. So we had to sell the concept of financial planning. And over these last 15 years, I think media and more financial planners and also more wealth, people are now aware about the concept of financial planning. So, trying to break through barriers was really a big challenge in the early days. And I'm talking about 15 years ago. Now it's a little easier. So now we think that, somebody who needs advice, somebody is willing to pay a fee, somebody who has goals which are slightly more than the wealth that they have today, and therefore needs advice and planning. The other big sort of change that has happened in India is really entrepreneurship and people selling stakes and selling businesses and suddenly coming into huge pots of money which they really don't know what to do because it's the
Yeah.
first time they've ever got it. So it gets tough for them. So we realize that there's also that piece where people have more wealth than what they need. But my personal take is that, there is a core component for which you need financial planning. Here's my day-to-day need, here's my medical requirement, this is for my child's education. So I can't just depend on, I've invested in a business, it will pay for it, and don't worry, we'll wing it. But that's the
Yeah.
way people have done it before, and they continue. I think a large portion continue.
Yeah. And so thinking about back in the early days, because the Innovating Advice Show has listeners all over the world and in many countries where financial planning is not yet known. So, what advice would you give to them? Because, like you said, you started doing what really is financial planning and goals based planning before you even had heard those concepts. That was just, I guess, instinctually in you in terms of how to best help clients. So, for other advisors out there that are listening that are maybe ahead of their time within their own country or region, how did you start to break through and get clients to understand that before it was so well known?
So I think couple of things. I did have some experience in a financial services business earlier, and every time a new product was available, I would go out and say, hey Kate, this is a great product for you, and find five other people whom I knew that here's a great product. And back of my mind, I knew that, oh, actually, it didn't suit that second person I spoke to. But this is the only thing I had. And I said, something in me tells me that not everyone is focused on doing right for the client.
Yeah.
So I think that's the number one requirement for anyone who's wanting to get into financial planning. And the other thing was that sometime when maybe I was 38, and I said, I wish somebody had told me 10 years ago what to do. That was a thought that came to me at that time. And so that became the second sort of element in offering financial planning, saying we'll educate clients. So we will not throw jargon, we will talk in English and not in finance,
Yeah.
and make them understand what they need to do. So I think these were two things that sort of started the business. And then it meant that, if I had to continue doing this, I had to continue being ahead of the curve, keep learning the new things that are happening, keep my antenna up for what's happening globally, and therefore not be surprised when newer regulation and newer sort of ways of doing business came to India and said, wow, here's a new way. And I said, oh, I've heard about this from South Africa. I heard this in Netherlands or any of the countries which were, moving pretty forward quickly in financial planning.
Yeah, and I want to highlight what you said there in terms of not using jargon and speaking English, not speaking finance. Because even people that have been very successful in their careers, doctors, lawyers, surgeons, you name it, they don't always understand even some of the most basic elements of financial planning and just taking care of their personal finance. So it's really important to make those connections and speak about things in a way that people can relate to. And I think that also really helps build trust. And you talked about that in terms of the importance of really educating your clients.
I think, it's probably just becomes a way of life, a way of being. Because even today, when I write an email to someone and I'm maybe using a term which everybody knows in the financial industry, say CAGR, the first time I use that acronym, I will always open brackets and explain what it is. At least expand the full form. If not, compounded annual growth rate means compound rate of return or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So, with wealth being relatively new in India, but with a population that continues to grow, how many financial advisors are in India and what do their business models look like?
We are stuck around, I think, a 2000 or 2500 CFP number. And I know when I enrolled in the program, they said, oh, we will be 1,000 or 2,000 in the next 2, 3 years. Requirement for the population that existed 12 years ago was that India needs 50,000 CFPs. And if you look at insurance agents at that time, there were actually 500,000. Mutual fund distributors are in excess of 50,000. But financial planners are now 2,000. Sometime in 2013, regulation for the investment advisor first came in. But they allowed for a lot of leeway, saying if you're a mutual fund distributor and you're offering incidental advice, you don't need to be registered as an investment advisor. If you're an insurance agent and you're offering incidental advice, you don't have to be registered. If you're a stockbroker and offering incidental advice, don't have to be registered. So the same person was wearing three hats and saying, I'm a stockbroker, here's some incidental advice, I'm an insurance agent, incidental advice. But I'm effectively offering advice, but I will not become an investment advisor, licensed, registered, stuff like that.
Wow.
So that number has also not grown. It's probably 1,300 investment advisors in the country, which includes the banks, etc., who statutorily required to take that license.
So there's no way that that's enough to actually serve the
Oh,
people
no.
that need it. And I imagine with wealth being new, is there a growing middle class there? Is it projected to grow in the next decade or so?
Yeah, I'm not great with statistics, but that is really, really big, the middle class. And, the definition of what is middle class, what is wealth, the way you probably have it over there's no such thing. So anybody out of their reach seems like high net worth.
Yeah.
So if they're dealing with people with, $100,000, $300,000 is high net worth, and 500,000 though is ultra high net worth. And the number of people that need to be dealt with is huge. I mean, among the demographics, you probably are aware that 60% of the population is under 30 in India. So here is a huge segment which is going to continue earning, saving, spending, everything all great for the economy, but a whole bunch of new money, lack of advice.
Yeah. So are there direct to consumer technology solutions that are coming about to serve sort of that younger, growing middle class?
Yeah, there are plenty. So what we've seen is that, the robo advice or quasi robo advice, lots and lots of offerings. The struggle really is a business model there at this moment, because they are able to get the first lot of clients, but loyalty, repeat, difficult, because again, from an Indian mindset point of view, what's the cheapest option? What's going to give the maximum mileage? So I find this whole situation where there are a bunch of good advisors and intermediaries who have clients, but they don't have technology. And there are these technology firms who have great technology, but don't have clients.
Yeah. So, speaking of technology, Lovaii, you started your company, International Money Matters, almost 20 years ago now. So, congratulations on all that you've accomplished over that time and being a front runner in everything that you've built, from charging fees to financial planning. And one of the things that you do is a lot of international cross border work with your clients. And one of the challenges is technology that can work with investments, taxes, estate planning, etc., across borders. So, what technology do you use to help with that?
Oh, frankly, I don't have the perfect answer for that one. What I have figured, and a little bit on how this cross border piece started. So, it actually started by my attending conferences in the US. And the first time I did a conference, I attended the conference, came back, and people asked me, "Oh, you only went to the conference? Why didn't you go and meet people? Why didn't you scout for clients?" I said, frankly, I didn't think that I could and should or want to do that. And then, with everyone telling me, why aren't you meeting people? I said, okay, let me dig out who I'm related to, whom I worked with, whom I studied with in the past. Are they there? I did this, I think, 5-week long trip to the US in that
Wow.
following year. And I went around and said, this is what I do in India. And would you be interested in? And of course, I met people only of Indian origin and say, hey, what are you doing about your stuff in India? And attending the conferences, and I would attend some of your US focus sessions, Plan 529 and 401k. These were all Greek and Latin to me the first
Yeah.
time I heard them. And then I started figuring this out. So when I hear something and I met the next client, I would say, oh, by the way, do you have a 529? Oh, you know about this. Wow. I mean, suddenly they felt I was this enlightened guru, but I was just picking up stuff and giving it back to them. In the beginning, there was a selfish need that, oh, I'll go and, pass some series 7 and whatever exams and tell them everything about the world. As I said, no, it's just not scalable. And as I advisors at these conferences, and, because I was visiting regularly, I would talk to them about their business models, find out which state, city they were in. And, if there was an Indian there, I'd say, oh, I'm coming down in this visit. I'll drop by at your office. So it was my way of doing some due diligence, understanding their model. And then when I referred somebody, it was with some knowledge at least, but you see whether it fits. And the selfish thing I did was I would tell them, you please ask that advisor that we should be marked on the emails or part of the call or conversation. So we will learn something. And whatever we learned, then we told the next client and said, by the way, have you considered this? I said, oh, okay, how do you know this? And say, okay, well, I can connect you with an advisor or a CPA. And each situation and case gave us more learning. And I think we are continuously learning yet. I don't think we are perfect.
Yeah, so a big part really is that continuous learning, which is great. It's something we all need to do in financial planning and every other profession, continually learn and accept that we're not going to know everything, and that's okay. And it's so great that you kept going back and picking up these pieces, and sounds like you took this slow and steady long route to take your time and really get to know it all. And for the people that maybe don't have the opportunity to attend conferences around the world, what advice would you give them where they might have cross-border clients and they need to find an estate planning attorney or a tax CPA or someone dealing with investments for a cross-border client in another country? How can they go about doing that?
So the first thing is, I think, attend the conference. Don't not attend. I
But
think,
if they, traveling around the world and attending conferences, that's a really big investment, and not
yeah.
everyone
So
has the opportunity to do that.
I think everybody has the opportunity. It's a choice they make where they invest. I'm glad you used the word investment, because a lot of people would ask me, why are you going back to the same conference? Is there something new you learned this time? And I say, sometimes I hear the same thing that I had heard 3 years ago, but it didn't ring any bells. It didn't connect any dots. And now suddenly it does. So it's not a cost, it's an investment. So that's good that you acknowledge that it's an investment. But I think if you could not really attend for whatever reason, at least find something within and around your region which allows you such exposure, and I'm sure you can find it. Otherwise, I suppose you would do exactly what you do otherwise to decide where to go for a holiday? Google, of course, but also just go and find around within your circle who you think might know somebody who has been to that place. Connect with other advisors within your country. If you can't travel, maybe somebody else from within your country has, and check with them. What did they pick up? I
Yeah.
think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, and that's a good example of just kind of where would you start with anything else? You would start by researching, asking people that you know, asking friends, colleagues. That's good advice. So, Levi, thinking about the business that you've built over the last 2 decades, I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it started out as just you, and now you've grown to a number of employees. And that's always a tough decision as a business owner. When do you start to bring other employees on? There's, two schools of thought. Some people say bring them on before you need them so you're ready. Other people have trouble letting go and want to stay in control, so they maybe wait a little bit too long. So talk us through what your thought process was when you brought on your first employee.
And so it was easy for me. I spent 18 years in different corporates before starting this business. So in my makeup, I was always looking at professional setup, larger setup, etc. But I did start on my own because my last job was with a dot com, and I was part of the pink slip era.
Yep.
So I said, okay, I'll start from home. I will have no investment. I will buy a second-hand laptop. And I think it was about 12 to 15 months into the business where it got to a stage where I used to be up till sometimes 1:30 in the night. Once that sort of started getting into a pattern, I said, oh, I better get someone to help me.
Yeah.
And I was teaching investment management at a college at that point in time. So I told the class that I'm thinking of recruiting. And the students got excited saying, oh, great, we want to work. I said, no, 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 I need only one person. I can't afford more. And I got two people to join. And I was always keen that, the organization is professional. I would have all the benefits of a large organization, which is process and continuity and stuff like that, but also all the benefits of a small organization, which was nimbleness and no bureaucracy. And I said, if I worry about people walking away with my clients, that means I have not done enough for my client.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, let's take it as it comes and start it that way. And somehow it's worked. There have been cases where, a lot of people actually from within my organization have started competing businesses, felt that they have learned enough and they should start on their own. And good luck to them. And some clients have moved. And ultimately, like I said, the objective really is to do what's right for the client.
Well, and that's a good abundance mentality, though, because we need more advisors and more people starting practices. And there are enough clients to go around. I don't think ever in our lifetime are we going to see enough financial advisors and financial planners in the world to help all of the people out there that need advice and planning, which, when it gets down to it, is everyone.
Absolutely. And I think just one thing I want to add is I think a lot of learning comes from clients. And I think sometimes clients do not recognize this when they pick a cheaper advisor, a newer advisor who might not have the experience. So I think there's one element which is the book knowledge, that this is the rate of return, this is rate of inflation, this is life expectancy. So here is your calculation. But what do you really do in a situation? In some of the experiences of someone who is just moving into retirement, who's just retired, and so on and so forth. I think a lot of that comes from experiences that you gather from other clients. And that's where I think that learning continues.
Learning always continues. So
Yeah.
I love technology. I love efficiencies. I know you travel a lot, so surely you are leveraging technology in your practice. So, what tool brings you the most efficiency in your business?
There is stuff in the wealth management space, but there's no great stuff in financial planning. And there's certainly nothing which is financial planning with wealth. So we are trying to see if we can get a global financial planning software along with the wealth management software and then talk to each other and come up with something. Um, for me personally, I think in terms of technology, things like Zoom, what we are talking on, really works well. Started doing a lot of in the last year or so is really using the calendar and putting down everything. So my team knows that, if there's any meeting which is going to be more than 5 minutes, even if I'm sort of sitting free or looking free in my room, you can't meet me. You put it on the calendar and tell me what the agenda is, and then we'll meet. So we're trying to build in some of these which bring in some sort of focus into meetings. I don't know whether that answers your question about what technology I use.
Yes, well, it's always just interesting to hear what comes to mind. And you're right, Zoom is one of those, being able to meet with people virtually, having clear calendars and agendas for meetings. I really like that. It's easy for meetings to get out of control and people will show up into a room. You don't really know what you're there for. And, all of a sudden an hour or two or three goes by and you're like, I don't know what the point of this was. So I like that focus around meetings. And I'll be really curious to hear what you end up building out with this global software platform you're working on, because one of the challenges we see is as people are working cross border, and you've already encountered this, there aren't a lot of tools out there that allow you to aggregate a client's international financial life and be able to print, on demand sort of your cash flow of factoring in different currencies, your investments from different countries. So please keep me posted on that. I'd love to see how that builds out.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a long, long time. So
Yes.
don't expect to hear from me soon on this.
Hey, all good things take a while. So it's better to be slow and steady and build something sustainable that really works than rush to market and have it not go so well.
Sure.
So, Lovaii, you do a lot of videos on social media. Is that something that's been beneficial for attracting new clients?
Yeah, I think so. One of our marketing consultants told us that there is a zero moment of truth when you don't know, when the client has sort of searched for you, found you somewhere, read something, heard something. So we just say that, as far as possible, we'll be visible, we'll be consistent, we'll be transparent. So we should just say the same things, even if it means saying the same things over and over again, we should. Like, we are talking about different ways of communicating. So I've done some anniversary messages of ours to clients in poetry form, in different ways. We've tried different things.
Fun.
I don't know what works and what doesn't. And the whole idea is that maintaining consistency in communication and frequency is important.
So, do you know what the number one way that clients find you is? Do you ask new clients if they found you through social media, through watching your videos? You don't ask?
We used to do some of this very diligently in the past, and we've tailed off, and just frankly, just today we had a discussion of our budgets. In India, the financial year starts on April 1. And this is one of the first things we've said, that, we must get customer feedback and maybe even prospect feedback on an ongoing basis. So we're going to work through something which is continuous and sustainable.
Yeah, we talked earlier about, especially when it comes to technology, robo advice. You mentioned some clients will jump to the next cheapest advisor. It's all about the return on investment. So I think it's really important to get that data and understand where is your time best spent and what does resonate best with your audience. Is it those videos? Is it the poetry? Is it a written blog post? Is it half and half among different clients and prospects?
One of the financial planning learning, which is asset allocation, do a little bit of everything. One of them will work.
Yes, that's diversification. That's true.
Yeah.
So, Lovaii, thank you so much for being on the show. We've talked about a lot of different things, from cross-border to technology, an overview of the market in India, building a practice, looking at when to hire. So, from everything we've talked about, or maybe something else, what is your call to action to listeners?
So if you are a financial advisor or not, you're just a prospect or a client and you're listening in, I think the first thing you need to do is hire a financial advisor. It really helps a lot, because I think while you may have the knowledge, if you're an advisor, you think you have the time, you certainly can't get over your own emotion. And that's a big bummer when it comes to managing your own money. I'm telling you from my own experience. So I have somebody from within my team who is my financial advisor. And it's such a relief to download stuff and say, this is what I was thinking this weekend. Why don't you look at my stuff and get back to me? And things move, and they don't have to wait for me to be free on a long weekend saying, okay, now let me go through my portfolio and take some action. So I think everybody needs a financial advisor, especially if you're a financial advisor yourself.
Yes. Yeah. If you're a surgeon, you're probably not going to do surgery on yourself. So make sure you get someone else. So, Lovaii, how
Sure.
can people connect with you? You're active on social media. Do you have a favorite platform?
Yeah, I think that the best way to connect with me is through Twitter or LinkedIn. Those are definitely places where I'm more sort of active.
Great. And I will include those links in the show notes. And I love the banner that you have on LinkedIn. It's from the panel that we did at a conference where it was you. We had Sean Brayman from Canada from Plan Plus. We had Mark Glover from HSBC. It was a very fun panel that we did at Financial Planning Association. So it's fun to see that on your banner. So I can't let you go without first asking, what is your favorite food or drink from India?
Oh, my favorite food is a dessert, which is ras malai. It's a Bengali sweet dish. I really don't know how it's made, but it's nice and sweet. It's just that I'm pretty much focused a lot on my health nowadays. And I've decided to cut off all sugar. But I said the only exception I'll make is for ras malai. So
Awesome.
sometimes I still do. Yeah, I used to have multiple pieces of that earlier. Now, if at all I do indulge in it, it'll be one at a time.
Yep. Everything in moderation is still good. So good for you. Lovaii, thank you so much for joining me today, for sharing all that you did. And I look forward to seeing you again at a conference somewhere around the world sometime soon.
And I do hope that this podcast ensures that India gets into the top 10 countries in the world on your podcast.
Yes, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Innovating Advice Show. I would love to hear from you directly about what resonated, what didn't, and what you'd like to hear in future episodes. You can connect with me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram at Innovating Advice, or hop on over to innovatingadvice.com. Till next time.